Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we're going to talk about the 10 cards that I underrated. One of the first thing I did on this channel was to rate every single card in the game. I still believe I'm the only one who did that, and this tier list was made before the release of the game, even before the pre-release. Um, and at that point when I made that list, some of the cards that were on that list basically have been spoiled like maybe a couple of weeks ago. So obviously there's no way I was going to get everything right from this list. Obviously, since then, uh, there has been way more games being played. There are way more players playing after release than before release, thank God. And not only that, we also had a lot of different events happening, and from that, a lot of new decks have been released, which have a huge impact on the meta, which inevitably led me to underrate some of those cards. And there's of course quite a few cards on my initial tier list, which happen to be significantly better than what I thought they were going to be at release. So obviously, um, I did not change the tier list, and you can find the original tier list on the description of the video, just to so then maybe you can pinpoint other cards that I might have underrated. Obviously, there are probably more than 10 cards that I underrated, but I just wanted to talk about the 10 most obvious example in this video. So without further ado, let's go into our number 10. So number 10 is the Swoop Racer. So Swoop Racer is I thought this card was simply just too weak compared to other 3-drop that you get access to. But it turns out that specifically in Boba Yellow, and even I've seen some people Boba Green also doing that, there's some matchup and example in which Swoop Racer can be a better 3-drop than other things that you have available, notably against control. So if you're playing against blue-green control decks, Swoop Racer can sometimes be better than a Boba, even a Boba Disintegrator, because it turns out that the 5 HP, the 2 extra HP that you get from on Boba, doesn't really matter as much. However, the +1 attack to put more pressure on the opponent and attack the opponent happens to be quite strong. So personally, so Swoop Racer I thought was unplayable. I think it is definitely very situational. But there are matchups in which he is a better 3-drop than the other thing that you have available, and this is why you sometimes see this card specifically in a sideboard, and the most common part for it is going to be in Boba Yellow. So I'm going to be upgrading this card from D tier to C tier. Next, we got Frontier ATRT. So basically kind of the same scenario as Swoop Racer. There are two major factors that made me misevaluate this card. The first one is that it turns out that there are a lot more vehicles in the early stage of the game than I initially thought, especially in Boba Yellow. You really have the Carter Spacer, the 7th Fleet Defender, and sometimes people also play the TIE Fighters, the normal one, or the Mining Guild TIE Fighter, which I think is very good in Boba Yellow. And then some people even go as far as playing the Headhunter in Boba Yellow, making Frontier ATRT very often just a 3-5 ambush, because it's relatively easy to get a vehicle in the first two turns of the game. And as a 3-5 ambush, it turns out that the other factor that made this card a lot more playable than I initially thought is the fact that Yellow-Black has access to almost no good 4-drop. There's really very few good 4-drops in those colors, and since you cannot go directly from 3 to 5 in the mono yellow Boba because you don't have access to resupply, you need to have something good to play on turn 3. And Frontier ATRT, as far as Spark of Rebellion is concerned, is as good as it gets. And that's why you now see Frontier ATRT played in most Boba Yellow deck as simply just a card that can come into play, kill a 2-drop, and stay on the board and put some pressure on the board, which is really something you want to do whenever you play Boba Yellow. You really want to apply maximum pressure on the opponent, and only use ambush units to get rid of enemy threats, because most of the other units are going to be focused on attacking the base. So I've upgraded this card from D tier to C tier. Still a very niche card, so I'm not going to put it further than C tier, but it is definitely a lot better than I thought originally. Another card in the same vein, we got the Cargo Juggernaut, but this time for the control archetypes. I really thought that Cargo Juggernaut was just a bad anti-aggro card, since the card is very expensive, and outside of the healing is the only immediate impact it has. So yes, it is not the best anti-aggro card, and I think if you really want to have a card that is focused against anti-aggro, you're probably better off playing cards like Repair or stuff like this. But Cargo Juggernaut has one quality that I've completely overlooked when I first evaluated the card, and that's the fact that the card is also pretty good against control. And the reason why it is good against control is because the 6 HP means that it cannot be killed by takedown, and the shield means that it's very difficult to bring his health lower than 6 to play takedown on it afterward. So the combination of the shield and the 6 HP makes it very difficult to remove for control decks. And even against control, the 4 healing is not completely irrelevant, so it is not amazing against aggro, it's not amazing against control, but it is decent against both control and aggro. And I think the combination of those two things makes the card playable in blue control decks, so typically the Krennic decks or the Aiden deck that we've seen. So I decided to upgrade this card from a D tier to a C tier for the exact same reason. It is definitely not amazing, but it is definitely playable in a competitive setting. The next card, this card is not so much that I've under-evaluated that card, but I simply was not expecting that we would be living in a meta where this card is actually strong, and that's obviously the Emperor's Legion. So the Emperor's Legion has always been designed to be the answer to Super Laser Blast as a way to completely get back all of your cards and put yourself very far ahead to be able to replay the most important threat of your deck, which are typically going to be the Vaders or the Vaders, the Fire Spray, or the Relentless. And the Emperor's Legion is just incredible against hard control. So the reason why I underrated that card is obviously because hard control was not really a thing before the release of the game. Actually, hard control, so whether you're talking about the Aiden red decks or the Vader blue decks that basically play almost no units and are really completely focused on controlling you out and milling you with Vigilance, and play 3 copies of Super Laser Blast, and where Super Laser Blast is really the pivot, the most important card of the deck. In that context, Emperor's Legion becomes a lot better. And so I was not really expecting that we would be living in a meta where this card would be good. So it's an honest mistake, to be honest, and I think it's simply because the metagame has involved a lot more towards control. And yeah, so Emperor's Legion, I rated it a D tier, and I think it is a C tier card. It's still very situational, and it's still at best a sideboard card, but it is definitely a lot more playable than I thought. Number 6, there's the Syndicate Laes. So as opposed to the previous card on this list, I always thought Syndicate Laes was underrated, and was a card that I think deserved to see a lot more play. But I think I myself underestimated how powerful this card could be. We're now starting seeing people playing Syndicate Laes instead of Bosk, or in addition to Bosk, which is pretty impressive since Bosk has been regarded for a very long time to be the best 5-drop in the game. So Syndicate Laes' qualities are simply because its stat line is very well positioned in the current meta, allows you to kill a Boba Disintegrator without dying, allows you to ambush a Sabine without dying. All this is very valuable, and also you can ambush and kill a fully operational, a full health Status Battalion or other 5-drops that exist in the game. So there are actually quite a few matchups in which Syndicate Laes can sometimes be better than Bosk, and that's the reason why you see him play. And of course, if it survives, the extra attack that he has over Bosk can be super relevant. And so yeah, Syndicate Laes is simply just very good, a lot better than we thought. So for me, I've decided to upgrade it from a C tier to a B tier. Still situational, still not going to see play everywhere, but definitely a lot better than people give it credit for initially. My number 5 is Steadfast Battalion. So Steadfast Battalion at release, when it first spoiled, was considered to be a draft card. Nobody saw it coming in terms of how powerful it was going to be played and constructed. It's only during the very first preseason of the Tech Initiative tournament, Top Cut tournament, where we started seeing mobile players bringing this card. So notably, for example, Astrotech was brought Steadfast Battalion for the very first time, and show us how powerful Steadfast Battalion was in combination with ECL in order to one-shot the enemy leaders. So obviously, by the time I made that tier list, this deck already existed, and that's the reason why I rated Steadfast Battalion relatively high. But I think what I've underestimated is that this interaction, ECL plus Steadfast Battalion, is not only good to snipe leaders. It's good full stop. It's basically good against almost everything. So yes, you're very dependent on ECL, and yes, it's only hits at a very specific timing in the game where you have your leaders out. But getting a 7/7 ambush overwhelm is strong against almost everything. And that's the reason why I think I've underrated the card. I really thought this was just a specific tech for a specific matchup, but it happens to be just way more than that. So I've decided to upgrade this card from a B tier to an A tier. Also, how powerful this card has been in aggro has been also very impressive. So yeah, it's just a great great card. Sorry. In my number 4, Vigilance, obviously. So this card is right now the hottest commodity. It's the card that sees the card that sees plays out of aspect the most. It's interesting to see that Vigilance sees plays almost exclusively out of aspect, so people play 6 for this card, and it is definitely not something that I saw coming. And Vigilance is the key card that most of the people who tested playing super hard control decks before the release of the game, those decks never really managed to work, and that's because we were missing that card, because we missed how powerful Vigilance can be as a win condition with the milling effect. So that's pretty much the effect that most people kind of underestimated, is the power of being able to mill 6 cards from your opponent's deck is just incredibly powerful as a win condition in a full alt control deck. And this is the key that was missing to us to see how much play this card would have. So obviously this card can kind of create a dominoes effect. So Vigilance being such a great win condition means that hard control decks like Iden Red or Vader Blue now becomes playable, which then provokes a whole lot of cards to become playable. For example, Emperor's Legion now becomes playable because it's a great counter to those strategies, and so on and so forth. So it kind of creates this domino effect. And probably if I had to name one card that makes the biggest difference in terms of the meta before release and after release, it has to be the out of aspect Vigilance. So this card costs one thing that is very interesting also to point out is the fact that before the release of the game, out of aspect cards were not considered the norm. Very few people were playing out of aspect cards, and in a lot of cases it was not considered to be playable in a competitive setting and constructed to be playing card out of aspects. There were a few exceptions, but mostly that was the case. I think Vigilant has really kind of broken the envelope on that, and there are cards like, for example, Cunning, now that we start seeing play out of aspect as well. So we'll start seeing a little bit more out of aspect card being played. It's still a very niche thing, and I don't expect it to become like in every deck, but definitely out of aspect card are definitely becoming a lot more common than they used to be, which I think is great for the game. It shows how deep deck building is in Star Wars Unlimited, and I think that's great. So here I decided to upgrade this from a B tier to an A tier. I still don't believe it is an S tier. I don't think it's an auto include in any control deck. I think it's really mostly beneficial for the hard control strategy that I talked about earlier. I think if you're playing a soft control deck that is mostly basing on green blue, I think you're better off. I don't think it's necessarily a good strategy for you to be going Vigilance, because then you're going to be Vigilance versus Vigilance against control, and this puts you at a disadvantage. And this basically doesn't give you any advantage, and also those kind of matchups are very, very low to resolve, and if you play this in tournament, you're most likely going to end up in a draw, which is not beneficial at all. So personally, I advise decks, especially green-black decks, to be going for a relentless Emperor's Legion approach rather than the Vigilance approach, because this will win you games much faster, and it also gives you an edge over just playing Vigilance versus Vigilance, which in this case you don't really have any edge. Direct consequence to the control meta and the fact that people are playing hard control is obviously now become selective discard becomes a lot stronger, because it is an answer to Super Laser Blast, it is an answer to Vigilance, and it is an answer to many other cards. And I think Spark of Rebellion is probably one of the cards that benefit the most from this new meta emerging. So this card initially I rated it as a B tier. Now I think it's an A tier card. It's just a card that is going to see play in every yellow white deck, and I've seen also a lot of people playing this card out of aspect as well, which is not a crazy idea, because having to pay 2 extra resources for this effect is, in very, very slow matchups, is not a bad idea at all. So this card is very, very strong. On my number 2, we got obviously Restock, direct consequence of obviously Vigilance making an appearance and the milling win condition becoming a thing. Now you can play Restock as a way to counter mill. Something I also completely overlooked with Restock when I first evaluated the card was the fact that I didn't know you could actually, among the 4 cards that you put at the bottom of your deck, you could actually put a Restock in there as well. So basically you play Restock, the Restock goes to the discard pile, and by the time the effect resolves, Restock is already in discard, meaning that you can place the Restock itself at the bottom of the discard pile. So that means that you become unmillable. And this, just the ability to become unmillable just by putting 1 card in your deck, and the fact that obviously this card can be played in any deck without any aspect penalty, those 2 factors combined makes this card a lot better than I thought. So there's that, and of course the super control meta where mill becomes a win condition. So those 2 factors combined made Restock a lot better than I initially thought. And this is why I've decided this card. I thought this card was absolutely unplayable, at least in the current state of the game. I was expecting this card would eventually become playable, but I did not expect it would happen right away. And now I would rate this card B tier. So that's the only card in this list that is jumping basically 2 tier compared to how I evaluated, which honestly makes sense, because I was really not expecting this card to be a thing in this first set. And I don't expect many people were. Finally, last but not least, we're going to talk about the 30 HP bases. 30 HP bases have been criminally underrated throughout before the release of the game. Basically, the narrative before the release of the game was that you basically always play the 25 HP base unless you have a very good reason not to. And now it's the narrative has completely flipped. Now it's the other way around. You always play the 30 HP base unless you have a very good reason not to. And personally, so one of the biggest surprises to me is how much command center / echo base you see play in the meta right now. And I'm also responsible for this as well, because I myself won a tournament with echo base instead of playing Energy Conversion Lab. Energy Conversion Lab is still the greatest base in the game. It's still way above everything else, but there are still some decks out there that don't really benefit from it. And ECL is a great card, but you gotta play the right cards to make the ECL worth it. And if you're playing a deck that doesn't benefit from it, then you're better off just going for the 30 HP base. We saw Cthulhu as well with his Grand Inquisitor deck playing Echo Base, playing Command Center, sorry, instead of ECL in his Grand Inquisitor deck, because Grand Inquisitor can basically sort of give ambush to everything, or basically can give immediate impact to any cards in his deck, almost any cards. So whether you disagree or you agree or you disagree with this, there's definitely a lot more room for 30 HP base than we initially thought, and that's even more obvious on the other bases. Now you're basically never gonna see Security Complex unless you're really seeing a specific deck. Capital City is always the preferred option. I don't remember seeing any Jeddah City being played now every people play Administrative Tower. On the Kestra City it's a bit more 50-50. Definitely Tarkin Towns in aggro deck has remained the preferred option, but everything that is non-aggro deck will prefer to play Castro City or Catacomb of Cardella, like the 30 HP red version. So definitely 30 HP bases are far stronger than we initially thought, and I think that's another great thing for the game. So I've decided to upgrade them from C tier. So in my initial tier list, basically you add ECL as S tier, basically nothing in A tier. Then you had the Tarkin Town in B tier, and then all the other bases were in C tier. Now basically I think the 25 HP base are in C tier. Then at B tier you have all the 30 HP base and Tarkin Town, and then nothing in A tier, and still a tier below above ECL on S tier. So that's it for this video. So if you have seen it, so I'm going to be putting my original tier list on the comment below, and if you find other cards that I've underrated, feel free to post them on the comments below. And next time I will probably do a top 10 cards of the card that I've overrated in my list. So hope this was entertaining for you guys, and let me know if you like that kind of video, and if you liked it, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.